Alright, so we're checking out the Foxeer Aura 3.5, and this is a binding file that they sent to me with the DJI O3 air unit in here. It comes in a 4-inch version as well, which is all of the frame pieces you see here, which I guess they're calling it the Aura 4. And the only difference is the arms. The arm length is a little bit different, so just to show you here, line up that screw, and it sticks out about that much. I think it's about half of an inch to accommodate that 4-inch prop versus the 3.5-inch prop. However, everything else is the same. The motors are the same, the flight controller is the same, the rest of the frame is the same. So the only thing that's different is the arm is a little bit longer. It's kind of an interesting situation, similar to like when that was about a year ago or so, when the Diatone came out with the 3.5 and the 4-inch version of their frame with the really huge 2204 motors. I believe those are 2203.5, something really big. And but the kV of the motors were different. Whereas on this setup here, between the Aura 3.5 and the Aura 4, that's the same kV, 2650 kV for a 6S setup. I think it's 36 or 3850 kV for 4, so I don't have that motor. Interestingly, this motor here is the 2105.5, 2650 kV, plus the Reaper F4 all-in-one or F7 all-in-one flight controller. The exact same electronics that are in the Foxeer 3.5. So this is basically in the same electronics in a Cinewhoop pusher format, 2105.5 motors, 2650 kV, 1300. Or sorry, this was also for 6S setup. But again, the motor's in a pusher configuration here instead of a puller or standard configuration. So you do see some prop wash oscillations due to the arm and the fact that the motor is kind of wide and does block a fair amount of the prop there at the hub. So I did have a video on one of Umagod's frames where I talked about this, where the large 2004 motor was blocking the prop when it's set up, whereas in a pusher setup like this, the size of the motor doesn't really matter because it's pushing the thrust away from the motor bell. And anyway, I'll link this video in the video description if you want to check it out. Basically, it's the same electronics. Obviously, this one's a DJI setup here. I think this is the Foxeer Apollo camera and the Vista on this one. But I'll link this down in the video description if you want to check it out. The flight characteristics are a bit different because of the prop guard situation versus the pusher and the puller configuration. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, just a little bit more on the frame itself. I think this is T700 carbon, high quality, chamfered edges. And the parts are the same except for the arms. So it's a staggered arm design. So this is the top plate. Top plate's about 2 millimeters thick. This is a staggered bottom plate. And the front part here is about 2 millimeters thick. And the other section also about 2 millimeters thick. And then the arms, they're about 5 millimeters thick. And what I mean by staggered is that this front section of the bottom plate is on the bottom of the arms here, and this rear section of the bottom plate is on top of the arms, so that sandwiches the arms and holds them in place, along with putting a little screw hole for the stack mount. Now they did make this 3D printed part here for the mounting of the O3 air unit. However, interestingly, on this frame they do have these holes, which I believe these appear to be the 25 millimeter whoop style mounting holes. So they could have just, instead of using the extra weight of the TPU mount, just found like an M1.6 screw and replaced the screw in the air unit and just screwed this directly to the bottom plate. I believe that's probably what they're probably going to do. But yeah, this, as the frame comes now, it does come with the piece to hold the air unit, and it's a hefty amount of weight, so I think it would be better to switch to a screw there instead of using a TPU part. Also, another thing about the design is because the O3 air unit can record the 4K video directly to the air unit, and if you don't want the props in view, you want to have this configuration here with this TPU part, and the camera is a little bit more forward, like this. And I was recording in 4K 60 ultra wide, and I did not see any props in view. However, if you don't care about that, and if you are going to be running the GoPro, you can use the carbon fiber mount that's going to be situated here. The camera's going to sit further back, But when you do that, the props are going to show up in the recorded view and a little bit of the FPV view. And since I was taking all my video, recording it to the air unit, I did not use the GoPro mount. This was on here from the factory. I just removed that because I wanted to save a little bit of weight. All right, so here's how much it weighs. 259 grams, no battery, and so yeah, we're definitely over the 250 limit to go for these larger 2105.5 motors. That's yeah, it's a smaller prop, but yeah, you're not going to be able to get under 250 grams on this particular setup. Now, I flew with two different batteries. This here is like a 850 6S, and then they're recommending a 1300 6S. It's a lot of extra weight when you go to this big battery. The 850 6S brings it all the way to about 388 grams, and then the 1300 is bringing their weight up to 453.2 grams. So it's a big jump up in weight when you go to the 1300. You get a fair amount more flight time. Also, it kind of depends on how you're flying it. With this heavier battery, you're not really going to be wanting to do too much acro. It's a lot of weight for the 3.5-inch prop to control, even though it is a really big motor. A lot of aggressive flying. It does have a lot of prop washout and stuff. It does not come with a tune from the factory. It's basically a Betaflight's default PID tune. So I think they could do a better job of maybe putting BlueJay firmware on the flight controller, ESC, also doing some PID tuning, just to have a little bit better control of the 3.5. It's a smaller prop, so with a lot of weight with a small prop, you need to dial up those PIDs a little bit to get better control, especially in the hard turns. But on the 1300, I was getting roughly 5-ish minutes, 5.5 minutes, a little bit less if I'm flying more aggressively, a little bit more if I'm flying kind of casually. But with this heavier weight, I tended to fly more casually, so I was kind of getting like 5.5, 6 minutes sometimes. With the smaller, lighter 850 6S setup, I could definitely do more, trick flips and rolls, that kind of stuff. By the end of the day, it's still pretty heavy. We're still pushing almost 400 grams, and that's still pretty hard to control with the 3.5-inch prop with the default Betaflight tune. So you're probably going to want to do some PID tuning to dial up. I think the P gains probably need the most, and then you probably need a little bit more in the D gains as well, just to get the PIDs dialed in. So I do want to point out a couple of issues I ran into. You see here the battery lead is out the back and the top like this. That is not how it came from the factory. It came with this shorter lead that had the battery leads are like right over here, and they were just sitting like here, but it wasn't secured to anything. And there's no standoff. There's a standoff here in the middle that you could zip tie to, but it didn't really do a good job. It's just kind of holding in place. And I did try to finagle it so that it was being kind of held by the battery strap a little bit, but when the first time I flew it, it got loose, and as you can see here, the battery the battery cord got cut up a little bit. So I ended up desoldering this because this lead was too short to make it all the way out this hole, and I soldered on. I think this is 16 gauge wire, and this is 14 gauge wire, so I'm using a little bit longer but thinner gauge wire and having it out here. And so with the connector out here, there's no problem with it getting sucked into the props. The other problem I was having was I think the flight controller was screwed down a little bit too tight, so I was getting a lot of like D-trim oscillations, like jitters. And so I used a longer screw and moved the flight control a little bit up and put a little bit of there's a little rubber grommet right here at the bottom to raise up the flight controller, because there was a lot of space here, of course, and just give it a little bit more cushioning so that it's not being, it gets less of the frame vibrations and the motor vibrations. And that helped in terms of resolving the, I would get oscillations when I was going over 50 to 60% throttle, basically full throttle punch outs, and I was getting a lot of like shaking and oscillations on the default PID tune. But I think it was because the flight controller was just, the screw was not long enough, and it was screwed down pretty tight. This little blue grommet was kind of squeezed down quite a bit. So I just put a longer screw in here and a little bit extra rubber grommet there to increase the dampening, and that fixed that problem. Anyway, I think it's just the first of many O3 air unit quads that are coming out now. I do have the that new iFlight Defender 25 on the way. There's a lot of controversy about that one as well. And there's a bunch of other models that are coming out that are going to be featuring the O3 air unit. So stay tuned for those. I probably will put the 4-inch together at some point because I do want to see how this setup works on a 4-inch. And I'm going to have to ask Foxeer to send me a tune for that because I'm pretty sure you're going to have to put a motor output limit because 2650 kV is probably too high for a 4-inch prop. Because it was pretty high, I think right on the edge, even for a 3.5-inch prop. So we'll have to see what happens. Typically, Foxeer sends me their stuff without any tune. Just comes with Betaflight default PIDs, and then later on they'll tune it. But by the it's quite a bit later after I've reviewed it, and some customers have ones that have tunes and some that don't have tunes. So I'm going to hopefully maybe have them send me the 4-inch PID tune, and I'll probably just transfer this O3 unit over to that frame. This frame, I'll build that out, and we'll see how that flies. But that's probably not going to be for a while. Several weeks down the road, probably not until like February or something like that. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Talk to you guys in the next one.